Video is to talk to you about early Russia. And so the key idea of this video is that the Byzantine Empire, due to the location of where the Byzantine Empire was and where early Russia was, these two civilizations the Byzantines influence Russia. The rivers are going to be used for trade, and they allowed the movement of people, goods, and ideas from the Byzantine Empire to go north to the Russian capital, the first one in Kiev, and then later on in Moscow. So to introduce the idea, a group of people known as Slavs developed a civilization around this city known as Kiev. This will eventually become early Russia, or Kievan Rus. They traded with the Byzantine Empire using the Dnieper River, and as a result, absorbed many of the Byzantine ways. Right? What we call that, you know it, is cultural diffusion, where two cultures, in this case the Byzantines and early Russia, were sharing ideas, technologies, and beliefs. So in this instance, in this specific time in history, we are talking about two civilizations using rivers for trade. So what happened was in Kievan Rus, this civilization would utilize the Dnieper River to sail down into the Black Sea and trade with Constantinople. And also the Byzantines would sail up the Black Sea and up the Dnieper River to trade in Kievan Rus. As a result, that interaction caused the Byzantine Empire to heavily influence this group of people known as Kievan Rus or early Russia. So in this instance, we're talking about rivers being utilized for trade. Normally, every other place we have studied, you should always be associating rivers, more importantly, with, say it with me now, shout it out, farming. Okay, most civilizations, when we talk about rivers, we're talking about how civilizations utilize those rivers for farming through irrigation and fertile soil. Okay, so there are three major ways that Russia was influenced by the Byzantine Empire. Number one, one of the most obvious ways was through their political power. So Ivan III was the first Russian king to take this title known as Tsar, and that was a reference back to Roman Caesars. Right? So Tsar is this idea of autocratic rule. So that's when a leader has control over everything. So autocratic rulers control all of the decision-making power in an empire. So Tsar is actually the Russian word for Caesar, which was the title that was used in the Roman Empire, and it was also still the title used in the Byzantine Empire. So like Emperor Justinian of the Byzantines referred to himself as a Caesar. The second way that the Byzantines influenced Russian culture comes to the architecture. So if you watched my play Pause It on the Byzantine Empire, which you should have at this point, you know what's coming. What is the most impactful aspect of Byzantine architecture? The dome and arch, right? Which can be seen clearly in places like the Hagia Sophia, right? And they borrowed the idea of the dome and the arch from the Romans. So what the Russians do, though, is they take aspects of the dome and arch and they put their own spin on it, creating something known as an onion dome. Right? So when we look here, we can see that instead of just having a circular dome on top, a semicircle, they all come to a point. And there is a reason for that. Right? So here is an example of an Orthodox church with an onion dome and the arch inside of a Russian Orthodox church. And the reason for that is because, one, the materials. So first of all, Russia had far more access to wood, not stone. And secondly, there's a lot more snow. And so they had to create a point at the top so that the snow would slide off instead of collapsing the domes. And then the third way that the Byzantine Empire really influenced the Russian people was through religion and the Eastern Orthodox Church. So the Russians were heavily influenced by the ideas of the Eastern Orthodox Church. In both cases, both the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church sent missionaries to Russia to try and convert the people to Christianity. Ultimately, the Russian rulers choose Orthodox Christianity, and there was a couple of reasons why. They were more familiar with it because of the trading that they did with the Byzantine, and also they were just physically closer to Constantinople or the Byzantine Empire. And lastly, they really liked the idea that in Orthodox Christianity, the Tsar or the emperor had power over the church, while in Catholicism or in the Catholic Church, the Pope had more power. So they decided to adopt Orthodox Christianity so that the ruler actually had more power than the leaders of the church. And then partly having to do with taking on Eastern Orthodox Christianity was that the missionaries wanted the people of early Russia to be able to interact with religious texts. So one missionary, a man named Cyril, invented a written language. He took aspects of the Slavic language with aspects of the Greek language and creates a new language and translates the Bible into what will become called Cyrillic. Right? So the Cyrillic alphabet is actually named for Saint Cyril, right? The missionary who brought written language to Russia. Right? So Saint Cyril brings the Cyrillic alphabet to the people of early Russia, and this increases literacy. This allows more people access to religious texts and increases the literacy within Russia. So that's just a quick overview of how the Byzantine Empire influenced Russia. Before you go, can you do my 3, 2, 1? Can you remember 3 ways the Byzantine Empire influenced Russia? Can you tell me 2 materials that you can use to help you study for your quiz this week? And can you tell me 1 question you still would like answered?